The woman in my window. "Come here, Christopher." I'd hear coming from outside of my window. Every night, the same raspy voice would beckon me forwards, taunting my every move. I've tried to sleep through it, but nothing works. Earbuds? I can still hear her over the blaring music. Earmuffs? She's somehow still audible. To this day, I've never opened my window, nor my curtains, when she tries calling me. However, one night was different. I grew weary, tired even, of the constant harassment. I wanted it to stop. I wanted her to go away. So I began to listen to her instructions and inch towards the windowsill, destined to put an end to her berating once and for all. Pulling the curtains back slightly, I heard a faint sigh of relief. But as I'd unveiled the outside world, nothing lurked behind the frosted glass. A chill went down my spine, as if I had done something I shouldn't have, like an unspoken rule being broken. Shutting the curtains, I leapt into bed and pulled the blankets over my head. I couldn't bear the thought of that woman returning, especially now, when I've listened to her commands. But she seemingly stopped. After that one night, after allowing myself to push through my own fears, she quit. Life went back to normal for a while. I attended high school with a rested mind, and the bags under my eyes began to clear. Everything felt right for once. Normal. Too normal, even. Worried that the woman would ever return, I told my parents about her, but to no avail. They didn't believe my story. I'd apparently lied to them too much in the past for them to automatically have my trust in a serious situation such as this one. Telling my mother and father was the worst mistake I've ever made. That night, the raspy voice returned. It was now, deepened, and with more of a shrill tone to it, as if it were getting weaker. "Come here, Christopher. Let me see you." It spoke from behind the curtains. Standing my ground once more, no longer afraid of the mysterious voice that stood outside the window, I crept forwards. I could hear rustling coming from the trees outside as the wind began to pick up. I grabbed the corner of the clothed curtain and yanked it to the side. What stood outside my window still terrifies me till this very day. A thin, lanky figure stood watching me with white, beady eyes. Her long, shriveled arms and veins that popped out of her throat proved she hadn't ate in a long while. I could see a pool of drool leak from her crooked, dry lips. She smiled a wide, toothy grin, baring the sharpened teeth that sat within her mouth. "Why don't you let me in?" she managed to croak out. I gasped in terror as I landed on my behind with a thud. My parents heard the noise and began rushing to my aid, but the door to my bedroom got jammed. I could hear and see the knob jiggle around as they tried to enter with no succession. "Christopher," the woman, no, the thing, muttered out. It reached onto the glass of the window, balled its hand into a fist and slammed the glass right out of the frame, shattering it into tiny shards. "I'm hungry, Christopher." It began to hover towards me, not even landing a single foot on the floor. "Mom, Dad," I screamed, grasping at the doorknob, pulling with all of my might. But it was no use. It was almost as if the door was enchanted to stay shut. "Please, don't hurt me," I screamed out and hunched over onto the door. I clasped my hands into a prayer and began to chant. "Dear Heaven Almighty, God help me within this frightful time." A loud hiss came from the other side of the room as the thing dropped from its hovering stance and began to angrily stomp towards me. Its legs bent in two different directions as it walked, as if it were mimicking human behavior. And then, it leapt towards me. I could feel the teeth of the monster clasp onto my thigh as it munched on the outer skin. I began to throw my fists into its face, slamming one hand into its eye. A shrill shriek came from it as it hopped backwards and out of the window and into the night. The door to my room slammed open, and both of my parents bent down at my side, holding my thigh to prevent blood from rushing out. An ambulance was called not too long after, and I was taken to a hospital, where they patched up my thigh. The doctor and my parents had some serious arguments in the hallway after I was treated. "We heard what it was. It wasn't an animal. It was talking to him," my mother screamed. "Ma'am, it's unreasonable to believe that the bite on your son's inner thigh could have been caused from anything but a small to medium-sized animal. It's not possible. Those aren't human-shaped teeth marks." Those words stuck in my head till this very day. After I was discharged and released from the hospital's care, we moved several states away to escape the creature. I hadn't heard from it since. Well, that was until tonight. Christopher. The familiar raspy voice lured outside of my window. Come here and let me in. Woke up to knocking and my mom's voice saying open the door at 3 a.m. I was home alone. First off, this is a true story, and looking for anyone else who has had this. I, at the time, 18M, was living at my parents' place, and we decided to move to a new home. I awoke one night to knocking on my door and my mother's voice telling me to get up. It's time for work. The issue was it was 3 a.m. on a Saturday, and I was home alone. Little bit of a background on our house. It was built in the late 90s, one floor with a basement. My family lived there for 18 years. I have 3 sisters and 4 older brothers. My brothers and I lived on the main floor, and my sisters in the basement. At this point in time, I was the only one, aside from my parents, living in the house. My sisters and brothers would hear things in the basement, especially in the storage room, and one of the rooms in the back corner. The corner bedroom's door would often open and close seemingly on its own accord, and my friends and I wouldn't go near it. Bad vibes, as my friend would put it. Things always seemed to happen if one of us was home alone. Most commonly was hearing footsteps, voices, movement in the attic, basic horror movie shh. One time I heard a door in the basement slam, and someone sprinting up the stairs when I was home alone. I bolted to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and hid behind the counter. Several times ankles were grabbed at night. Dark shadows were seen in corners. The works back to the main topic. Last day of moving boxes out of the house, and I decided to stay at the old house overnight alone, because my parents are arguably worse than a demon or nothing at all. Night alone with the Xbox, 50 flat screen, and the hub to myself, with some Marco's Pizza and a Red Bull. I am paranoid, so I checked the doors to the house to make sure they were locked, and even locked my bedroom door. Went to sleep around 11:30, I'd say, and was out like a light. Knock, 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 Mom's voice. Honey, wake up, you're going to be late for work. Me, groggy. What? What time is it? Knock, knock, knock. Mom's voice. Honey, come open the door, you're going to be late. Knock, knock. Me, gets up. Walks over to the door. I reach for the handle all of a sudden. Ice. I remember I'm home alone. Mom's voice. Open the door. Me. Slowly turns and looks at the clock. It's 3 a.m. on a Saturday. The doors were locked. I'm home alone and my parents and miles away. So I backed up and said nope, got my Bible and started praying. Be gone, Satan. LOL. In all seriousness, after the realization hit me, it stopped. No other noise, just terror, asked my mom in the morning why she came back to house last night. Obviously she hadn't. This is a genuine story, BTW, not some horror story, although it certainly felt like it. Just want to see if there is anyone with a similar story or any thoughts on the matter. Hide and seek. I'm sure most of you guys are familiar with the game One Man Hide and Seek. If you're not, then here is a brief description of it. You find a doll for a demon to possess, and you play hide and seek with it. If you win, then good for you. But if you lose, then it's literally game over. I decided to try it out mainly because I was curious as to find out if it actually worked. I went to an antique store and bought a creepy-looking rag doll because I didn't want to use a doll I was emotionally attached to. The ritual goes as follows. You have to replace the stuffing in the doll with rice. Also, you have to clip off a few pieces of your nails and place them inside. You then have to sew it shut with a red thread. Also, you have to fill the bathtub with water. You have to give the doll a name, so I chose the name Sam. I grabbed a pair of scissors from the kitchen drawer because I needed them in the ritual. It's also important to note that you must always keep a cup of salt water with you. When the clock struck 3 a.m., I said, Charles is the first it, Charles is the first it, Charles is the first it. I didn't use my real name because I didn't want the demon to know what my name is. Besides, if something happened, might as well send the bad luck to my enemy. I hurried to the bathroom and placed the doll in the bathtub. I quickly turned off all the lights in the house and hid in the living room because that's where the TV was. I turned the TV to static because if the demon was close, I would be able to tell by the TV static. I hid behind the couch with my cup of salt water. I closed my eyes and counted to 10 while my grip tightened firmly around the scissors. After I had finished counting to 10, I ran back to the bathroom with the scissors in my hand and said, "I have found you, Sam." Then I proceeded to stab the doll. I repeated this process 3 times before I said, "You are the next it." I moved the doll out of the bathtub and onto the bathroom counter and hid behind the couch again. I waited for what felt like an hour. The TV suddenly started turning on and off on its own. That probably meant that the doll was close. I held my breath and started counting inside of me. 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, to calm myself, until the TV turned to static, and nothing more happened. I waited a little longer with the scissors still in my hand. Nothing. I slowly peeked my head out to see if I could spot anything, but I didn't. Damn. Had it actually worked? Like, did I have an actual demon-possessed doll playing hide-and-seek with me? That sounded awesome, but at the same time I was terrified for my own life. I looked at the cup of salt water sitting beside me and the scissors in my hand. If something happened, I knew how to finish the game, and on top of that I had something to defend myself with. I was going to make it out alive. I listened carefully to try and hear the footsteps of the doll, to pinpoint where it was and where it was headed. But I heard nothing. Nothing but total silence and my heart beating loud and fast in my chest. I wondered what a demon actually looked like. If it looked like a creature with horns and a tail, or if it looked completely different. As curious as I was, I had no intentions of finding out. I was happy in not knowing what it looked like. Suddenly, I heard what sounded like glass hitting the floor, and I knew right then and there that the ritual had worked. I pressed myself into the corner holding both the cup of salt water and the scissors in my hands. I held my breath and started to count again. The TV started making weird noises and turning on and off again. For some reason it felt like the doll was nearer this time. I decided that enough was enough. I poured half of the cup of salt water in my mouth, and I bravely stepped out from my hiding place. There it was, right on the other side of the couch. I poured the remaining salt water on the doll and spitted the salt water I had in my mouth on it. I said, "I win, I win, I win." That was supposed to end the ritual. The doll fell on the floor. Bloody hell. I blurted out. I cautiously poked the doll a few times. I had to be sure the demon had left. When it still didn't move, I picked it up and looked at my phone. The clock read 05:15 a.m. Fuck. I thought to myself, the ritual wasn't supposed to last for more than 2 hours. I lost track of time. Oh well, it's only been 15 minutes. I mean, that can't hurt, can it? I thought. I walked over to the fireplace and started a fire. I threw the doll inside the fire and watched it burn. After a while, I put out the fire and found the doll in ashes. I scooped the ashes into a box and got in my car. I drove to the woods far away from my home and buried the box by a tree I found there. After that, I drove home. The ritual had worked, and I had successfully ended it. I yawned, feeling sleep creeping in on me. I went to bed and quickly fell asleep. When I awoke, I remember parts of my strange dream. I only remember the doll and a note stating, "Game over." I was probably scared from what had happened. I went about my day forgetting the strange dream. That night when I went to bed, I heard a knocking on my door. What in the world? Who could that be at this hour? I got up and went downstairs in my pajamas. I opened the door and found no one. Bloody kids, I said to myself, and closed the door. I turned around and found a note on the floor. It read, "Game over," in red. My heart stopped and my insides turned cold. I knew who it was. Suddenly, I felt someone poking me in my back. My cousins live in North Dakota, and I spent the winter break there freshman year in college. We were at their friend's house one night, drinking in her basement with some other girls, and it was really late, like 3 a.m. I was falling asleep, so I decided to walk home. They live in a desolate area, with lots of snow, and it gets really cold, especially at night. But the houses weren't too far apart, and when the moon is out, it seems light out. The path we always take is straight behind the house, through some wooded areas, then more open land, and as I was shuffling home through the snow with my head down, I look up, and to the left, my 10 o'clock and probably like 75 yards away, is another figure walking in the opposite direction. I saw him a split second before he saw me, and when he did, he kind of jerked his arms, shoulders up a little, obviously startled from the sight of me as I was with him. I laughed out loud for some reason, just from the shock or something, and gave him a little wave like, "Oh, you startled me, haha, sorry," kind of thing. He just stood there and stared at me. I thought he was going to say something for a second, and so I was stopped too, just looking at him. He had a full-face ski mask on, and I could tell it was a dude because he was really tall. But he didn't say anything. So for what felt like forever, it's just me and some stranger in a ski mask, looking at each other, in the desolate woods, in the middle of winter, at 3 a.m. A huge chill went up my spine, and a voice said, "You need to get the fuck out of here, right now." I turned and started walking as fast as I could home. I have never been that scared in my life. I was a little drunk, stoned, and very paranoid. I imagined me walking home from the opposite perspective, and the man is running up from behind with an axe. So I literally just screamed and started sprinting as fast as I could all the way home, thinking that this guy could easily follow my tracks in the snow, and I'm gonna get murdered. Luckily I didn't, but I don't think I'll be visiting them again anytime soon. December, the time of year when reality seems to buckle and split, a single braided rope fraying into parallel manic and depressive strands. Holiday cheer everywhere, LED lights and joyous inflatable Santas in the front yards, all framed by the unendingly gray sky, sun setting at 4 p.m. cold and miserable. Cars skid on the invisible black ice and end up in snowbanks or flying into a mailbox decorated with paper snowflakes. People dress up in layers and go running in the snow, exerting themselves to their limits so their bodies won't succumb to the deadly numb of cold. Misery, depression, and stress pile up inside homes as their inhabitants try to find the right Christmas present, the one that'll make someone happy. It was easier when there was still snow. You remember just last year that awful blizzard, the one that broke all the young trees into pieces and covered everything with uncaring, endless white until all the contours of the world broke down. You remember looking out your window and seeing an alien landscape of smooth, sparkling white, where your neighborhood used to be. You remember the agonizing months going by, the snow melting just enough in the day to refreeze into a hard sheet of ice at night. You remember, by March, wishing that it would never snow again. This year is worse. This year there isn't snow. It's not quite cold enough to snow. It's still cold, but a nasty in-between cold, not a proper cold. It's the climate change. You read a few headlines about it, but knowing about it doesn't really compare to the moment you step outside in a t-shirt and windbreaker and start sweating. Something's wrong about that, but you only realize what when you get home from school at 4, looking at the way twilight paints the trees black. It's December. You're sweating, and it's December. You miss the snow. The neighbor's magnolia tree is budding, taking the earth's cue that it's spring already, and you find yourself feeling sorry for a plant. If somehow it does freeze this year, the buds will get shocked and fall off, and come spring, you won't get to see the magnificent blooms that coat everything in a layer of giant pink petals. Now, seeing the magnolia's buds just make you sad. There's other problems from the warm December too. There's still bugs. You wake up Monday morning itching your arm, and after a coffee you have the presence of mind to look down. A red bug bite sits in the crook of your elbow, inflamed skin screaming for you to scratch it. A bug bite. In December, you curse all mosquitoes, their ancestors, their descendants, and God for good measure. You scratch until it stops itching and starts hurting. Then you put on a long sleeve shirt and try to forget about it as you go to school. You've never been good at self-restraint. You're not surprised that it's still red and puffy by dinner time, but you're working on being more responsible, so you put calamine lotion on it. It tingles. The pink liquid cakes on, and it's right in the bend of the elbow, so you can tell that you'll be shedding dried pieces of pink crap every time you move in your sleep. But the itching stops, and that's all you really wanted. You wake up Tuesday morning sweating. The heater had barely been running all month, leaving the house uncomfortably chilly, but it finally kicked on last night, and when you wake up, your mouth is cotton, your sheets a heat-trapping prison. It's so awful that you take a cold shower before going to school. The rest of the day is surprisingly good, though. The shower reset your mood and you're feeling better. You even forget about the stupid bug bite on your arm. You wonder if it's going to get cold enough to go ice skating. You hope so. Wednesday morning, you're too hot again, and the dry heat has irritated your skin. Your bug bite had faded from a swollen red lump, but the mosquitoes continue their vengeance, and there's a coin-sized red rash in the crook of your elbow. It itches. The dry air is making your whole body itch too, your skin protesting the lack of moisture in your room. You wonder if you should get a humidifier. That whole day you can't stop scratching, not just your stupid bug bite, but your arms, shoulders, calves. The feeling is driving you insane, and people give you weird looks. On the way home, you go to the 99-cent store and get the cheapest bottle of lotion money can buy. There's a nice pink flower on the front, and you don't have any allergies, so you'll probably be fine. You cover your entire body in the greasy stuff before going to bed. Only as you hit the pillow do you remember that you still don't have a humidifier. Thursday, the rash is still there. Something's wrong, though. It covers more of the inside of your elbow than it did yesterday. You gently close your arm to check, watching the skin fold. No. Yes. It definitely is larger. You must have scratched it too much yesterday. It's still itching today, and you rub some of the cheap lotion into it before getting dressed. It helps. Not enough, but some. Maybe you're finally getting the eczema that's been passed down your bloodline. It was one of those genetic things you had been hoping to avoid, like lactose intolerance. But you can't spend any more time thinking about it. Thinking about it just makes you need to scratch more, and you haven't done any of your Christmas shopping yet. After school, you stop by the Barnes & Nobles. You mean to get something nice for your brother, but instead, you end up buying a hot chocolate from the Starbucks inside. It's still 2 weeks away, and the crush of people inside buying gifts is a little overwhelming. The itchiest part of your body is now your shoulders. The skin prickles, catching even against the soft fabric of your t-shirt. You scratch and scratch, hoping to ease the pressure for longer than 30 seconds. But even when you scratch too hard and feel pain, it doesn't relieve the need to scratch. You can't do any homework that night. The itching is driving you to distraction. You look at yourself in the mirror before you step in the shower, and your breath catches in your throat. Thick red lines on your shoulders, furrows from your own fingernails. The rash on your arm is red and large from all the scratching, and the same coin-sized rash you found in your elbow is now right under your rib cage. You frown, scratching it absently. You don't remember getting bitten there. Did you? Sleep that night is hard. You dream of something soft under your mouth. It tastes sweet, and you extend your tongue again and again to lap at it. It's a nice dream, but it's still too hot in your bedroom, and you keep half waking up, sweaty and itchy, rolling and scratching until you can sleep again and return to the pleasant escape of the dream. You wake up. Your skin is tingling. You've just got a lot of dead skin. That's the problem. You've got to get rid of it. Once you can scratch off all the dead skin, you won't feel itchy anymore. And it seems to work. You scratch until you're red. You scratch through the skin, down to the clear fluid underneath, and it's exhilarating. You breathe deeply for the first time all day when your nails come away wet. The relief is unlike anything else you've felt before. And then you fall into a frenzy. You're scratching everywhere you can reach, tearing it all off. Your skin gives beneath your bruised, bloody fingernails. You keep scratching, and scratching, and scratching, and scratching, and scratching. Your hands are wet. Your fingernails hurt, but you're so close. Strengthening your grip, you scrape away the last thing that itches. Your dry scalp. It comes down, and down, and down, away from you. You inhale deeply through your abdomen. Your eyes blink. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Eventually you adjust to the harsh white light. There's soft pieces of something lying around you. You can taste iron in the air. You move your lower sets of legs around to rearrange yourself, to step out of the pile. You reach out your tongue down to the hard white ground, tasting one of the soft pieces. It is sweet. I'm not sure it counts as another human being because we didn't positively identify anyone. But a few years ago, my friend and I were staying in a small cabin my dad had on a remote piece of land in the Idaho wilderness. The nearest town was probably 50 miles away, and the nearest active road that wasn't an old logging road was about 2 miles from the cabin. My friend and I had been laughing in the cabin in our bunks, and it was about midnight. We had turned off the lantern and were trying to fall asleep when we heard something that sounded like something had scraped the door. We both lifted our heads up and mumbled a conversation of, "Did you hear something?" "Yeah, haha." Then, in the middle of nowhere, in this remote cabin, someone starts knocking on the door. Doesn't say anything, just knocks. We were both in our 30s, but we were so scared shitless we didn't say anything, just lay there with our heads up staring at the door. We didn't go out until it was light out again, and there was nothing near the door that would have tapped against it, and no animal tracks. It freaks me out even thinking about it. The story of the creep. So I was taking the bus to work, a 10-minute ride. I had my headphones in and was listening to music. I was sitting near the front of the bus and noticed in the very front seats facing the aisle, there was a disheveled man seemingly talking to himself. Other than taking note, I paid no other attention. Since the bus ride was short, we quickly arrived at the stop to let me off at the mall where I work. As I got up to get off the bus, the man that had been talking to himself was in front of me. We filed off, and he immediately turned to me and said something. At first I didn't catch it as I still had my headphones in and music blaring. He was directly in front of me, in my personal space, so I took off a headphone and said to him, "What was that?" That was my mistake. He replied, "Want to see something small?" with an evil-ish grin. "No," I said, and put my headphones back on and moved past him. I was walking quickly to get away from him. There was no other people that weary around the stop, and the few that had got off the bus were already almost at the mall, just a couple minutes walk from me. I glanced behind me and the same man was quick on my heels following me. He kept saying, "Hey, want to see something small?" And by this point I was walking so fast I was almost in a sprint. Instead of following the pathway to the mall, I started to make my way through the parking lot, weaving around cars. There was no one around, and the man was still hot on my heels shouting the same line to me. I reached the mall entrance just as the man was reaching for me and saw a woman entering the doors too. I yelled out, "Get the F away from me, you creep." Just as the man was reaching for the zipper on his pants, the woman saw the look of terror and panic on my face and heard me out of breath. From the impromptu almost run I just did trying to distance myself from this guy, and she started yelling to the man to buzz off as well. She grabbed my arm and pulled me into the mall doors, and luckily there was a security guard right there. I quickly told the guard what had happened and he stopped the guy from coming in the mall. I didn't stick around as security were talking to the man, so I didn't see what happened next, if anything. I was unsettled the rest of the day at work.